Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Are there good real estate investments in the Metaverse? And what exactly is the Metaverse? You'll understand all that and more on the second of two episodes in our Future of Real Estate series, Metaverse Real Estate, today on Get Rich Education. The EQRP system now allows you to shield up to $700,000 of income from taxes every year. My friend Damian Lupo informed me that checkbook IRAs have been made illegal by the U.S. tax court. So if you have a checkbook IRA, your holdings are now disqualified with taxes and penalties up to 50%. But don't panic, Damian and the EQRP team can fix this. This way you can invest your 401k or IRA in real estate, gold, Bitcoin, and even your own business. So whether you're a full-time investor, retired, or even a dentist with dozens of employees, if you're listening, you qualify. The EQRP works. It's the solution. You'll control your retirement money, kill UBIT, and pay way less taxes. I encourage you to learn more about this strategy and free up your retirement money. Get the newest EQRP special report. Text GRE to 307-213-3475. Text GRE to 307-213-3475. Mid-South homebuyers, with over 2 decades as the nation's highest-rated turnkey provider, their empathetic property managers use your return on investment as their North Star. It's no wonder smart investors line up to get their completely renovated income properties like it's the newest iPhone. Headquartered in Memphis with their globally attractive cash flows, Mid-South has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and 4,000 houses renovated. There is zero markup on maintenance, let that sink in, and they average a 98.9% occupancy rate with an industry-leading 3.5-year average renter term. Every home they offer you will have brand new components, a bumper-to-bumper 1-year warranty, new 30-year roofs, and wait for it, a high-quality renter in an astounding price range, $100,000 to $150,000. Get to know Mid-South. Enjoy cash flow from day one at midsouthhomebuyers.com. That's midsouthhomebuyers.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from the universe to the metaverse, and with more than 4.5 million listener downloads worldwide, you're listening to one of America's longest running and most listened to shows on real estate investing. This might be the first podcast that you ever listen to in your life. For the 427th consecutive week, this is where financially free beats debt free. The abundance mentality rides roughshod over everything, and that's why you don't quit your daydream. The voice of real estate investing, this is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, but you aren't here for me. You are here for you. Welcome back. It's the sequel in our 2-part series, The Future of Real Estate. It's part 2 of 2, and we're talking about Metaverse real estate today. Last week, we discussed real estate technology in the real world. Today, Metaverse real estate, we are going where the show has never gone before. And if you don't understand what the Metaverse is at all, no worries, you are not alone. I don't have a great grasp of it either. Our guest expert and I will start off rather fundamentally for you on that today. But before we get into the Metaverse, let's update 2 real-world future of real estate trends. Boxabl, Boxabl, you might have heard of them before. They're known for a home that sets up in about 1 hour. It's delivered to a site, and then it sort of unfolds, really, over an hour. That's going to be a pretty small home, and you can imagine some of the limits with Boxabl. It sort of feels like living in an RV, except it's a little larger than that, and then there aren't any wheels on a Boxabl home, although there are some larger Boxabl designs too. And the last time that I checked several months ago, the first ever Boxabl manufacturing plant was being built. Boxabl, that's something that you might see used, for example, if there's a remote construction site out in the middle of nowhere and the construction workers need some temporary housing. Now, as for permanent housing in the real world, When you think about the future of real estate, 3D printed homes often come to mind. It seems like over the years that there's a story about them that bubbles up and then it goes away and then it bubbles up again a few years later. But a lot like conventionally built homes, 3D printed homes, they still have the cost of the land that you're building on. They still have a cost of materials, especially the concrete in 3D printed homes. That concrete, it gets deposited like layers of toothpaste squeezed out of a tube and formed all on top of each other to create walls. And then on top of the land and material costs, there are still labor costs, though 3D printing should take fewer laborers than a conventionally built home. But more recently here, one of America's biggest home builders, Lennar, they've teamed up with Icon, a 3D printing company, just outside Austin, Texas, to build the first major housing development to be 3D printed on site. They are building a community of 100 3D printed homes. I recently watched an interview with the chairman of Lennar right there on the actual construction site, and he talked about the promise of being able to build badly needed workforce housing faster. I learned that prices start in the mid 400s. Yeah, that's workforce housing anymore. That's pretty close to the median American home value today. And what they're building there on that community of 100 3D printed homes are 3 to 4 bedroom homes. And it really feels and looks more like a project at NASA than a home construction site. And Icon, the 3D printer there on that site just outside Austin, they claim they can build the entire wall system of the home, which includes the mechanical and the electrical and the plumbing. And now the printers are designed to operate 24 hours a day, but they don't because there's other development in the area. So they don't operate 24 hours a day because of area noise restrictions. There is a real promise of robotic construction and automation there. And then there are other companies like California-based Mighty Buildings. They're also using 3D printing technology, but they print the homes in a factory and then they move them out onto the site. Like I told you a few minutes ago, the first large-scale 3D printing development outside Austin, Texas, on that one, Icon brings the factory to the site and they do the building right there on the site, not in an off-site factory. And I've kept you up to date with those developments and more real estate wealth building guidance and other info that we don't have time to fit into the big show here every week. I do that to you with our Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. That's our newsletter, which I write myself. You can still get our letter for free. Just text GRE to 66866. Get our wealth building newsletter free. Again, text GRE to 66866. Let's explore Metaverse real estate. This week's featured guest is a huge technology guy. He is the chairman and CEO of Founders Space. It's a global innovation hub for entrepreneurs, corporations, and investors with over 50 partners in 22 countries. He's authored several award-winning books. Welcome to GRE, Steve Hoffman.
Keith, it is fantastic to be here.
He is also known as Captain Hoff. He spends a lot of time on planes traveling internationally, so we appreciate that he landed here with us today. I've got to say, Steve, I am still skeptical about the metaverse, but that has a lot to do with the fact that I do not have a good understanding of it. So how do you define the metaverse?
Nobody really knows the definition for the metaverse, but let me give you the common understanding. So the common understanding is a virtual space where you can interact with other people and virtual objects. This can be a whole world with an economy. We saw this very early on with products like Second Life, which is now quite old, and it isn't as popular as it used to be. It used to be incredibly popular with revenue exceeding $500 million. However, it dwindled. Now we had a resurgence of the metaverse, especially when Facebook changed its name to Meta and created a huge amount of hype, and also with the blockchain and what we're going to talk about today, virtual real estate.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a lot of interesting points. I guess this would bring to mind, how is the metaverse organized? Like, for example, you mentioned Second Life and how it's waned in popularity. I imagine if I had bought metaverse real estate in Second Life and that's waning in popularity, would my property lose value? Or just talk to us more about the organization of the metaverse.
Each of these metaverses, or what these applications in the metaverse, there's no single metaverse. So right now, there are different applications that you can enter, and each one of them is part of the collective metaverse. So Second Life was an early one. And yes, people spent a lot of money on their characters, on buildings, on costumes, a lot of money and a lot of time. Real money. And some people were making lots of money at the time. There were even people making a living on it. However, when it waned in popularity, which happens to any of these metaverse applications, a lot of them are fads. They'll go in and out of style. A lot of them become dated, like Second Life became dated. The graphics just didn't look as good. And people started to spend more time on Facebook and less in the metaverse. And when this happened, people left. And when people leave and they're spending less money, what you have there tends to decline in value. It's true anywhere. It's like a neighborhood. If people are leaving the neighborhood and selling their homes in the neighborhood, those homes are going to go down. If people are flocking to that neighborhood, they really want to get in, has great school districts, has other attributes, it's on the rise, the property values go up. The property can be anything from virtual real estate to virtual objects, clothing, you name it.
All right. So these applications within the metaverse have a lifespan, perhaps even a finite lifespan here. So, all right, a lot of it has to do with the popularity of the platform, it sounds like. So, yeah, in a sense, one doesn't really buy land in the metaverse so much as they buy it through an application like a Decentraland, which is part of the greater metaverse.
Exactly. There's no one metaverse you go to buy all your stuff. So what there are is a bunch of applications that allow you to enter these virtual spaces, which we call the metaverse. And let's take Decentraland, because that is right now probably the most popular one out there, especially for real estate, buying and selling real estate.
Okay.
There are other ones that are very popular for gaming and socialization, but for real estate, Decentraland is one of the top, if not the top. You go into Decentraland, it is pretty cool. You can walk around, you can see Atari has places, all these different brands are there, Snoop Dogg, celebrities. And this real estate, if you got in early, you could literally buy a little plot of land for $20, $20. Now the average price is above $3,500. And some of this land here has sold for millions of dollars. It's insane. Like some of it sold for huge amounts. Now, what makes land in a metaverse worth something? Well, there's one thing that always makes something worth something, and that's that somebody else will pay more. So if somebody will pay more than you paid, it's worth something, or it's at least worth more than you paid. And people wanted to get in. There's also scarcity. So they have a limited number of plots of land. It's not unlimited. But of course, this is the metaverse. This is just code. They could change the code and literally the amount of land could be infinite. But you have to trust the people who run the application that they're going to stick to their word and do what they say. And in this case, they said there's a limited number of plots and there won't be more. And it's on the blockchain. And you can literally go in there, and they are called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. You don't really have to understand what that is, but it's a name for something on the blockchain that you can literally buy and then own and then sell to somebody else. It's one instance. It's like, and these instances can encapsulate whatever you want. They could be an image, they could be a video file. In this case, they are land in a virtual world, the NFT. And so you buy, it could be a house, it could be a stadium, it could be, anything. You can build your own stuff. If you buy a blank plot of land, you can get their software out there called Blender, which is open source. And you can either hire somebody, or if you're creative enough, create your own structure and put it on your property and then hopefully increase the value and sell it. And people have been doing this, and people have made a lot of money. It's been very, very popular. And what makes it of value? Well, some say the coordinates, like they have different coordinates. And if the coordinates are an even number, like something like 7070 or something like that, that feels good, that can up the value. If your plot of land is next to somebody popular, like some celebrity, like Snoop Dogg's plot of land, well, it could be worth a lot more. If you build a really cool virtual property on it, a luxurious house with a pool and it look a really cool interior design, well, that could be worth a lot. But it all ends up coming down to, just like with Second Life, the community. And this is what I want to stress, because everybody has to understand that these are marketplaces. Like, it's a marketplace where people are buying and selling. If the marketplace is active and people are coming in, there's more buyers coming in than there are sellers, the price will go up. If the marketplace slows down and the number of buyers dwindles and a lot more people are trying to sell, the price goes down. Now, before I get into the dynamics of this, I just want to say there are a couple others out there. Sandbox is another big one besides Decentraland. And there's a really cool one out there called Upland. Now, Upland, you could say, well, a lot of these, they're just virtual space. They don't tie into anything in the real world.
Right.
Well, Upland actually sells you a plot of land in the real world. You can literally go to your house, like in the real world, your plot of land, and you could buy your own house as an NFT on the blockchain, and you would own that in the application of Upland. And there are people out there buying, the Transamerica building in San Francisco, the plot that is the Empire State Building in New York. They're buying their condo complex they live in. They could buy a Dodger Stadium. So there are people buying and selling all these things, and it ties into real world maps. Now, what are these worth? What is the virtual version of your home on the blockchain, or your plot of land on the blockchain actually worth? Nobody knows. Again, it all comes down to it's worth exactly how much somebody else in that application Upland will pay for it. And Upland, there's scarcity, right? Because there are only so many plots of land in the world.
Right.
And so only so many in a city, and they have correlations to real world locations like downtown Chicago or downtown New York, Times Square. They could be worth more. But there could be an infinite number of Uplands. So Upland is one application that was made, and it's very cool. There could be a lot of anybody could launch a new application doing exactly the same thing. Well, the question is, what makes one application, one metaverse world worth more than another? Well, some of it is literally, like any marketplace, a network effect. The more people you get in, right? The more people you get involved, you become a dominant player, and the more people want to participate. It's like Facebook, right? All your friends are on Facebook, so you go to Facebook if you want to connect with those friends. If all your friends are participating in Upland or Decentraland or Sandbox, those guys who gain traction early on in the marketplace, they have momentum, they have a brand that people recognize, and they have drawing power because they're very active and social, and the marketplaces are very vibrant.
Yeah, so I imagine if you owned a trophy property like the Empire State Building in Upland, therefore you as the owner of that would probably be incentivized to promote Upland and increase its network effects. And I think you'd probably agree that we're talking about investments, if you want to call these investments, that are highly speculative, like the example that you gave earlier of someone getting in early on a platform and buying a plot of land for $20 that's now worth $3,500. Yes, a lot of this coming back to faith and belief and what they call the greater fool theory. I'm going to purchase at one price, hoping a greater fool will come along and pay a greater price for that. So it sounds like a lot of it has to do with not just your knowledge, but your timing.
It has to do with your timing and your belief that this application in the metaverse will take off. Because if it doesn't, if people ignore it, if it never gains traction, well, even though $20 you might not get your $20 back. So it doesn't matter how cheap it is if it doesn't go. Of course, the lower you buy it or the earlier on, the higher potential it has to grow. If you come in at a high price, it's a much bigger risk and you may be spending much more money. You've pointed out something very important, and this is what I want to get to. Is it a good investment? Is it, smart to go into these metaverse places, these virtual worlds, and buy up assets and property and try to speculate on it? Well, if you're doing it, this is my personal opinion, and there are people out there who say it's a great investment. There are people out there who will swear by it. There are even metaverse real estate agents who will go and represent you and show you, take you around and show you what property is good. And of course, they want to get paid something to do that.
Sure.
But my personal opinion is If the same money you would go to Las Vegas on because you want to blow it on a casino, you love to gamble, you think it's fun, and you can afford to lose the money, well, then, okay, go into the metaverse and spend your money.
Yeah.
Because if it's fun for you, if you're getting some entertainment value out of it, if you, just like in a casino where you get free drinks and you like all the flashing lights and you go to the shows and whatever, if you're getting some entertainment value out of it and you want to gamble, then it's perfectly fine. If you are thinking of it as a real investment, there are problems with it. Now, the problems are endemic to the whole metaverse. First of all, some people say, well, you could rent out this property. And people do rent out their virtual property for virtual events, all sorts of things.
And get a real income stream from it?
Yes. And they have ones out there like Axie Infinity where people could actually, you buy these characters and then you could rent the characters to other people who go earn more points and earn currency. Basically, you can earn currency in these. One of my friends, he didn't take my advice. He went out and he started buying up virtual property because my advice is just do it for fun, but he was doing it as a potential investment. He went out there, bought up a bunch.
Fun to watch.
They have these different game mechanics. So ones where you can buy like gas stations or grocery stores, and they guarantee you income in tokens, in these basically coins, these tokens. And the idea is that you get these tokens, that these tokens are worth something. And then if the value of the tokens increase and the number of tokens you acquire goes up, you could make a lot of money. Well, a lot of these systems, they are almost like Ponzi schemes because they're giving out these tokens to you, but at a certain point, they give out so many tokens, inflation takes over, right? And there's just too many tokens in the market. And then the price, the token, everything starts to go down. Very hard to manage these economies. Really, really hard. Axie Infinity, a very popular one, has suffered massive inflation. They also got hacked for a huge amount. People stole a bunch of these tokens. Hackers stole, I think, $1 billion worth, just an enormous, maybe it was 600 million, an enormous amount of money. There are a lot of risks. So when you're going in here, you have to understand this is total speculation. It's total gambling. No matter what somebody says, no matter, even if they have mechanisms that say they're guaranteed to make you money, you never get a free lunch. So my advice is if you're a real investor, personally stick to real property. The real property is always going to be scarce and it's always going to go up in value over the long haul. And it's worth something, like, especially if you have a good location, you can make money on your property. You can rent it out. You can do all sorts of things. In these virtual worlds, this metaverse, you don't know. And I want to give you a real concrete example. Bored Apes. I looked at Bored Apes early on. They were under 5 figures, right?
Bored Apes NFTs. Yeah.
Yeah. Bored Apes NFTs. They were like, you could get a Bored Ape for $20,000. Then all of a sudden, Bored Apes were selling for millions and celebrities were buying them, like Justin Bieber and all these stuff. Well, those Bored Apes that they bought for millions are now down to 5 figures again. So, $60,000, $70,000. So they were a fad. People bought them. But what can you do with them? Like, what can you do with these virtual objects? You could show them off on your profile page, brag about them. And maybe if you're super lucky, you can sell them to somebody else who will pay more. And even in Decentraland, which is a metaverse, right? You actually go into Decentraland, and I will tell you, a lot of it's a ghost town. There aren't that many users. Most of the users are literally buying and selling property. They're not actually spending time in this metaverse. And why? Because we have found with Second Life and with all these ones that I ran a virtual world company in the old days, way, way, way back during the Second Life days. So I know this intimately. I'm an entrepreneur and, now I'm an investor and I run a startup accelerator founder space, but I ran a virtual world company. I will tell you, these things are like games. Most games go in and out of fashion very quickly. And so you need to keep this in mind when you're doing this. And if you are speculating, it's really hard to know the right time to buy. And it's even harder to know the right time to sell. When is it peaking? When is that interest peaking? But again, I don't want to totally dissuade people. Mark Zuckerberg has invested enormous amounts of money in the metaverse, right? He's losing like $10 billion a year.
Losing money, yeah.
and he built this whole metaverse himself. He spent billions of dollars on it. Nobody came. Why? The fundamental reason is metaverse itself, a virtual world in and of itself, isn't that compelling. Most people do not want to go in with an avatar and just hang out. It takes time to get in there. And who are you going to hang out with? People you don't even know or care about, right? And what are you going to do? A much more compelling version of the metaverse are these games, are real games where they have real gameplay mechanics. They have a mission, a goal, World of Warcraft, any of these games out there, you name it. There are all sorts of different games. People love those. People will spend money for the virtual items, whether it's virtual armor or, new types of laser guns or whatever it is, scenarios. They'll spend money on those. Those have real value to the people playing the game, right? Because of the gameplay mechanic. A lot of these virtual worlds in the metaverse don't really have a strong mechanic that sucks you in. You just go there and you're like, what am I supposed to do? So you walk around for a while and then you get bored and leave. That's been my experience. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people.
Right. And people would need to want to spend time there and patronize a store that you might own in the metaverse in order to bring some more value to these properties. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Steve Hoffman. More on metaverse real estate when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. If you're looking to grow your passive income from real estate, pay attention. My Property Stats is a deal analysis tool developed by an active investor to cut the time it takes to analyze any deal by over 90%. For any real estate class, you can calculate the exact price to pay to hit your cash flow and IRR goals. Build a world-class pro forma. Calculate the most you should pay for a renovation. Run multiple scenarios with a comparison tool and more. My Property Stats is the all-in-one toolkit for real estate investors. That means more deals, more cash flow, and more returns. Go to mypropertystats.com/GRE now and use the coupon code GRE to get 10% off your first year. That's just $90 a year for a tool that can save 10 hours per deal. No more spreadsheets, no more juggling multiple files. Use coupon code GRE to get 10% off at mypropertystats.com/GRE. Knowing the difference between a turnkey provider and a vertically integrated rental property company can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of your investment. Some companies sell you a property they don't own, renovate it with contractors they don't control, refer you to a property management company they don't manage, all in multiple markets because they can't source enough inventory. That's why truly passive investors work with our friends at JWB Real Estate Capital, perhaps the country's only vertically integrated rental property investment company. They operate in one market, Jacksonville, Florida, and their whole job is to make investing in rental properties easy for you. In fact, because of their vertically integrated approach, their clients have gained 79% more home price appreciation than the overall Jacksonville market since 2013. Find out more about why it pays to invest with JWB. Call them at 904-677-6777 or go to jwbrealestate.com/GRE. GRE listeners can't stop talking about their service from Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They've provided our tribe with more loans than anyone. They're truly a top lender for beginners and veterans. It's where I go to get my own loans for single-family rental property up to 4plexes. So start your pre-qualification and you can chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even deliver your custom plan for growing your real estate portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is author Jim Rickards. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Steve Hoffman, also known as Captain Hoff. He runs Founders Space. We're talking about metaverse real estate. I suppose I'm homeless in the metaverse because I don't own any property there, and I don't know that I will be anytime soon either. A lot of this comes down to value. That's where we left the chat, Steve. And value is just something that's really interesting. Our dollar, a lot of its value comes from this faith and this belief that we have that dollars have value. value. Of course, in real estate, where you recommended that one is better off buying real, tangible real estate in the real world, there's value there. And it takes real world resources to create real estate in the real world, like lumber and concrete and labor and a furnace to keep me warm. Then there's something like Bitcoin, where maybe you can say it has value. It does have absolute scarcity. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And it actually takes real world value to create a Bitcoin, like a lot of electricity, for example. So can you talk to us more about like the best case for a potential value proposition with metaverse real estate?
So let me get into value, because value is a really important thing to understand. You know, people say fiat currency is like the US dollar. It's just based on faith. That is partially true, but it's also based on institutions. So we have the US government. We have all these institutions that support the US government, our whole legal system, Congress, our state and local governments. We have all these businesses that have bought into this and rely on this system to run, you know, every corporation in America, all the people of America, the taxpayers of America. So all of these things make the US currency not just a matter of faith. We are part of the system. All of us depend on the system. And yes, there's an element of faith there. We have to believe in it. But even if, you know, you stop believing it, that system is going to probably go on, because so many people have a stake in the system. As long as the system isn't fundamentally broken, right, falling apart because of monetary policy and like outrageous inflation or things like that, then you are going to be able to redeem your US dollar for something.
Sure. Our dollar is backed by the world's largest military. You must pay your taxes in US dollars.
Yes. And we have all these trade agreements. We have all these corporations. We have a lot of power in the world, right? There is a lot backing that dollar. You go to other virtual things on the blockchain, like tokens, right? A lot of those tokens, like Dogecoin or whatever, that's mostly backed by Elon Musk's tweets, right? Like if he tweets, it goes up. If he stops tweeting about it, it goes down. And, you know, it was created as a meme, first of all. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones. Some have more tangible value propositions than others. I would say 97% of the tokens out there are really almost pure faith. Right? Pure faith in the future. 3% have some tangible values. You take Bitcoin, for example. I wouldn't say Bitcoin is ever going to be as stable as the US dollar. Some people would say it'd be more stable, but that's just my opinion versus theirs. For the reasons I told you, the US dollar has a lot more going for it. But Bitcoin does have a value proposition, and that is it's the number one in terms of adoption and brand recognition of all the tokens out there, all the coins. Number two, people perceive it as more stable. Again, that creates value there. Number three, there are value propositions people are using it for. Some of them are not legal, like laundering money, like foreign governments, you know, getting their money in there, people getting money out of countries with high inflation. It has become a store of value, like gold or other things. So Bitcoin probably has the strongest use case. Ethereum maybe the next strongest, because it's used to power all these applications like Decentraland that we're talking about, Upland, all these, they tend to be on Ethereum's platform. So some of these are in a much better structural position. Then you get down to these virtual worlds like Decentraland, right? These metaverse places where you have the virtual land and the property, and you're like, what is the value that they offer? And that value usually comes down to the vibrancy of the community. Like I said, if the community is really active, if it has a good brand recognition, if people are in there actually creating stuff, buying, selling, engaging with it, the higher that factor is, the more potential it has to maintain and possibly increase its value.
Now, we think about currency and we think of the vibrancy of that community. Part of that might be the business infrastructure of that metaverse community. If someone wanted to go get a mortgage for their metaverse real estate, how would they go about doing that?
Well, you can get a loan from anywhere. You know, in the blockchain universe, you can get loans and you could call them a mortgage for that property. Most banks, I would say almost every real bank would never give you a loan for that unless it was tied to your, you know, you backed it up personally with maybe assets from your real world house like, to back up the loan for that metaverse property. And then you're going to lose your house if you don't pay it back, or you'll have to go bankrupt, things like that. I don't see any rational bank out there just writing you a loan based on the value of the metaverse property. And that says a lot. Now, of course, banks tend to be conservative. They tend to be behind the times. But in this case, banks may have it right. These are just too risky. It's like me saying, I'm going to give you a mortgage to go to Vegas and gamble on the craps tables. I'm sure you're going to pay me back, right? Probably not.
Now, you mentioned a brand earlier. I know that big brands like Prada, they've designed virtual clothing for the metaverse. So a lot of these companies are really getting name recognition wherever eyeballs are. So I imagine there's a substantial marketing component to the metaverse and the real estate therein.
This is another factor we should discuss because it's really relevant. It's great of you to bring it up. Brands are in there. If you go to Decentraland, you'll see a lot of big brands like in this space. Now, it's very simple for a brand. It all equates to eyeballs, right? And engagement. If there are people there, if there's activity there, if you can get a halo effect, if even by being in a space, even if there aren't that many people participating, like I said, Decentraland is not as active as people would like to imagine it is, for all the activity around buying and selling property, people actually hanging out there and doing stuff isn't as much, but they get write-ups. They get a lot of press. So, Atari makes a big deal about being in Decentraland. They get a lot of press. All these different brands are in there, Prada, making virtual goods. What they're doing it for is the PR, right? Yeah. If they can make headlines, if the article can go viral, that pays for itself. They pay for itself 10 times over. So they're always looking, whatever the latest, greatest trend is, marketing people are all over it. Because if people are going to engage, if it's going to get them a headline, if it's going to get people looking at it, engaging with their brand and thinking they're cool, the coolness factor, they'll be in there. That doesn't mean it's sustainable because these marketing campaigns, they're one-offs, right? They're going to do a marketing campaign. If they get a lot of mileage on it, they might do another. If not, they're on to the next shiny object.
Gosh, that is certainly super interesting. Well, Steve, I've got to say, I have learned more from this discussion about the metaverse than I ever had previously. So it's been really valuable. I think our listeners are going to find it valuable as well. Why don't you let our audience know, since you are such a technology person and an expert in so many of these new virtual fields, let them know your website or perhaps your social handles.
So absolutely. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm super easy. Just go to founderspace.com, Founderspace. You can contact me directly from the website. Also, my book's there. So if you're super interested in learning about the metaverse and future technologies like AI and how they're going to change everything, I have a new book out called The 5 Forces That Changes Everything. So The 5 Forces, you can get it on my website. You can get it on Amazon. It's distributed everywhere. Also have a couple other books I want to mention to your audience. Make Elephants Fly is all about innovation. So about how you take that big idea in your head, and it can be an idea about technology, about brands, about to do something, to be an entrepreneur and make it fly, even though it seems impossible. And my third book, published by HarperCollins, really popular book for entrepreneurs, is called Surviving a Startup. So if any of your audience out there wants to get those, just go to founderspace.com. You can also reach out to me. I'm on virtually every social network.
Steve is an award-winning author, and he can really make complex concepts simple, just like he has for you today. Steve, thanks so much for coming onto the show.
Keith, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, really interesting from Steve Hoffman today. You can learn more about how to get involved with him and all he's doing, again, at founderspace.com. Steve has quite a following. And how do you feel about the fact that someone else might own your real-life home's address in the metaverse? And who knows, maybe that's a way to suck people into these things. For example, you might feel weird about someone else owning your physical home address on a prominent metaverse platform, so you go in and buy it yourself before no one else does, and now there you are, you're buying real estate in the metaverse all of a sudden. And that's surely not a recommendation from me there. It all sounds like a rather gamified experience in the metaverse, but really it all includes being subject to some of the same real-world market dynamics of demand and scarcity and even monetary token inflation. Are you thinking about making a loan to someone else in the metaverse there with real estate? You got to consider if you would want to charge your borrower like a 50% mortgage rate, or if that would even be high enough. Well, here at GRE, we've done a Future of Real Estate series a few times now, and I've got to say, on this latest 2-episode series, I did some learning last week on framing new build homes faster, and this week on the Metaverse. Next week, we're bringing it back to real world real estate and how it has made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else in the world. A big shout out one more time to your featured guest this week, Steve Hoffman. It takes a team here to put this show together each and every week, and ours is terrific. Big thanks to GRE COO Andre Newbern, Content Manager Matthew Blunt, Investment Coach Naresh Vissa, Sound Engineer Bidron Jampo, Websites Marvin Diaz Jr., Advertising Jake Madoff. I'm your host Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.